Hey guys, it's Fabian here with his HBI Savage Nitro 25 brushless conversion. I would like to state that for those who are interested in converting your HBI Savage 25 into a brushless setup, I would recommend this due to the costly factors of going brushless with buying a new truck. It's simply more cost effective to just convert than to just buy something new. Plus you get to recycle something that's not usable or unfavorable into something you can now use and enjoy again. I'm going to first talk about what I did to convert this truck and then hopefully give you guys some tips and tricks along the way about what I've done. As you can see, my truck is filthy and dirty. I know everyone makes YouTube videos of your trucks looking crisp and clean and pretty, but I'm an enthusiast and I like to enjoy my truck every day, so it's kind of hard to keep it clean. As long as my truck is fully functional, durable, and reliable, that's all I need. That's going to meet my demands to be happy with my hobby here. As you can see, my body's scratched up, it's banged up, there's nothing special about it. It's more or less a Frankenstein, as you can see. But I'm happy with it, and it didn't cost me that much money. Probably about a third of the cost it would take to buy something new. So I'm going to first talk about the 2-speed transmission. That seems to be a pretty good focal point to start with. And these Savage 25s, everyone knows they come with a 2-speed transmission. And I've been reading and I've been hearing a lot about people telling others that they have to convert this to a single-speed setup with a metal gear and such, and to be similar to the Flux version. I think this is a misconception. I don't know. I've done my own experimentation, and I'm running the stock 2-speed, and I know I don't have reverse, and that's fine with me. I don't use reverse that often, but I'm very happy with this 2-speed. This 2-speed is functioning just fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just as durable, and it holds up to the LiPo 5S setup that I have right now. So there's no need to really convert your 2-speed into a single speed and to buy metal gears. I would just stick with what it's got. They always say if it's not fixed, if it's not broke, don't fix it, So all I did to the 2-speed setup was open it up, inspect the gears, check out the bearings, check out the bearing housings, make sure there's no play in it. And then I just resealed it with some gasket material, and I filled it up with some Lucas oil, and I filled it up to about halfway up the bottom gear so that there's not that much oil in it, but there's just enough to get in there to go around and keep things lubricated in there. So that's all I did with the 2-speed setup. I kept it just the way it is because I felt like it was just fine and that there was going to be plenty of durability coming from this transmission. The biggest issue with the Savage 25 is definitely the differentials. So if you're going to go brushless, you have to change the differentials out. The factory setup has currently the 2 spider gears in the diff housing. You have to replace those. I went ahead and went with the bulletproof setup as what would come with the Flux, with the beveled gears that are case hardened. They're real meaty gears for the differential. Now for the innards of the differential inside the diff housing, I went with the 4 spider gears from the Lightning series, and it's a much harder material, and it's case hardened and heat treated, so it'll definitely meet the demands of all the torque the brushless motor can produce. So you have to change out the stock 2 spider gears that are currently in it. They're just simply too weak and brittle, and they won't be able to handle brushless setup power at all. So after you bulletproof your differential, what I did was I went in there, I opened it up, I inspected the diff housing. My diff housings were worn out. They were oblonged and they were warped. If your diff housings are warped, you have to replace them. So all I did was just replace them with a factory diff housing from a HP or a Flux or an XL, as long as it can have the 2 slots that you can provide the 2 sets of spider gears for, a total of 4. and using the proper shims that come with it. This is important. You have to properly shim the differential. If you don't properly shim those spider gears, you're going to have your spider gears strip out. So if you do the shimming properly and you install everything properly, then these differentials should last you a long time. So that's a must. Upgrade your differentials if you're going to do a conversion like this for a 25 Savage. The CV axles are the same. I didn't touch those. The CV hubs are the same. I didn't upgrade to a Vortex hub or anything like that. A Vortex cup, I mean. So I kept that all the same. I can talk a little bit about the motor for right now. It's a Tacon 2150 kV motor and a easy run speed controller, 150 amp. I'm running a 5S Zippy 500,000 or 5,000 milliamp hour battery. I don't know if it's a 40 or a 45 discharge rate, but it's fairly good. And I made my custom aluminum mounts. As you can see here, these are just some scrap aluminum that I had laying around, and I mounted it to this brace here so that this could add. It's actually really rigid. I was on a budget, so I didn't want to spend money on buying mounts and stuff like that for the motor, and this allows for plenty of adjustability. I can go up if I want to run a bigger spur. If I can go down if I want to run a smaller spur. So this gives me adjustability for what I need for whatever setup. And I'm currently running a 21 pinion gear. That's a steel gear. And then I'm running a 52 tooth aluminum spur gear. And if you're wondering, I got rid of the slipper clutch. It's no longer a slipper clutch. I know you guys probably just like, well, why would you do that? But I JB welded this spur gear to this backing plate here. And the reason being is that I had too many issues with the factory slipper clutch, and I didn't want to upgrade to a Robinson Racing one. And I simply JB welded it. And so far, it's holding up just great, and my transmission's still fine. So I wouldn't have any concerns about that. If you have a slipper clutch that's strong, I recommend Robinson Racing. I heard good things about them, and they tend to hold up pretty well. But I've just JB welded mine, and it's just fine. It's holding up just to what I need. I've given this truck plenty of abuse and plenty of power to it, and it's just fine. So the speed controller is just in here too. It's sitting on this back aluminum plate down here. That was where the motor would usually go. I just have it JB welded to the actual frame. I have a thin layer of foam in between it, so that gives me some kind of cushion. But besides that, it's fine. Important thing, if you're going to go LiPo setup, you have to make sure you use proper EC5 connectors and that you don't cold solder. You have to use good solder, good temperature, and you have to use flux. If you're going to get a good solder, that's what you need. If you don't do a good solder, you get a cold solder, it's going to be a restriction point right here. You're going to have too much resistance, and therefore that could cause the battery to heat up if you don't have the proper solder done correctly. You want to have it as properly done as possible, so that the electricity can flow from here to the speed controller with ease. I could shorten the wire up a little bit, but I think for right now it's fine. My battery hasn't been running too hot. It's got a good discharge rate, so the speed controller doesn't have to ask for too much. There's always plenty of supply for the demand of the speed controller. So now I'm going to talk about the speed controller. I shortened these cables up substantially. They're a lot shorter, and they're going to the motor here, so they're only about maybe 3 inches long, if that. And once again, I did great solders on these, using flux and a good high amperage solder and proper solder, so that I can get a good solder for these EC5 connectors. Because if you have poor solder and you have long cables, you actually heat the speed controller up, and you don't want that. I know they say they have a thermal protection built in, and they have a fan, but this is just extra safety precautions, and it's also to help with the longevity of the speed controller and your truck itself. So if you've got good solder points and proper cable lengths, everything should be running pretty cool. If you want to run cool, you got to make sure you run proper gearing. That's a big thing. If your motor starts to run hot, more than likely you've got some drivetrain that's being too tough, as in it's grabbing somewhere and it doesn't freely roll that easy if you got drag. But you know, if you run proper gearing, your motor should run just fine. My motor runs around 140, you know, 145 degrees, which I'm very satisfied with. So you know, it's all about knowing your car. You know, factory gearing is different. I have different gearing done because I am running smaller tires. I decided to run with smaller tires because and I'm not a big fan of bigger tires. Number one thing I hate about big tires on a Savage that's brushless is wheelies. I know everyone's all about having wheelies and everything like that. It's fun and all, but you know, it makes the truck undrivable. You can't drive a truck that's always constantly doing wheelies. I mean, I've seen people that have the wheelie bars that are like sticking out up here, and then you do a wheelie, it like sits up way up high like this, you know, and I don't know, that's cool and all, but that's not for me. I like to actually put the power to the ground and actually go and accelerate. Use my truck to the full potential, you know. You know, if you're going to do a wheelie, maybe a wheelie like this high is fine, you know, but doing those crazy overkill wheelies or just standing backflips is really unnecessary. You know, if you really want to enjoy your truck to the true potential, you got to drive it, you know, without having those crazy wheelies, which is one thing why I went down to these smaller tires, you know. It's allowed me to limit my wheelies, and it actually puts the power to the ground, and I don't have to worry about having to ease off the throttle to get control back of my truck because it wants to flip over. So running smaller tires is a good benefit for wheelies. Another great benefit is that if you run smaller tires, your drivetrain is not going to take that much abuse. You know, it takes less energy and less strain for the motor to turn over a smaller tire. So if you have big tires on it, you know, and you're stripping out spider gears or you're stripping out gears in the transmission, you know, more than likely, you know, there's too much drivetrain strain going on. You have to release that stress. The force has to go somewhere, and 9 times out of 10 it goes to your gears, either in your differential or in your transmission. So by running smaller tires, you're actually reducing the amount of stress that you're putting on your actual drive system. So if you're having problems with stripping out gears, either A, because you don't have it shimmed properly, or B, it's just been a long time and you want to increase the longevity of your gears, you know, run smaller tires for a little bit. You know, it'll be a lot easier on your differentials, and you know, your motor might actually run cooler for a change, you know, because you're not having to work the motor so hard to turn those big tires. Of course, you know, if you gear everything properly, you won't ever have an issue with motor temps, but you know, reducing tire size can help out, and plus you get a little bit more acceleration. If you're going to run smaller tires on a factory setup for the pinion and spur gear for a Savage, you're going to have to gear it up a little bit. It's going to top out rather quick, so I recommend gearing it. I mean, I got mine set to a 2152, and it tops out right around 52 miles an hour, which is plenty of speed for what I need for it. So if you're going to go smaller tire, you got to gear up. If you go bigger tire, you may have to gear down. It just depends on your motor temps and your current setup. For my application, these tires are great. They're from Proline. These are some OFNA buggy tires, and these are some 17mm OFNA hubs that I used. I had them laying around. Like I said, everything I've done here is on a budget, you know. So regardless of that, you know, I'm pretty satisfied with the output of the motor, and plus the temperatures and the actual tire size. It has good quick acceleration, and it tends to stick on the ground quite well. So if you don't like wheelies, try going to a smaller tire, and or get a wheelie bar that sits like this high off the ground, so you don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to talk about my motor mounts, just scrap aluminum that I found, and same thing for my battery here. I think I already mentioned, but for the battery, you know, you don't want to have a battery case. I know the stock Savage has these batteries